Prison Fae, Supernatural Penitentiary Book 1. Written by Drake Mason and Marissa Mills. Narrated by Annalee Scott. 1. Erin Reed's lips curled, and her blue eyes narrowed, her wrinkles deepening as she wrapped the measuring tape around my waist. I focused my attention on her thick black hair. Her gray roots were beginning to show. The first week of every month, Erin took our measurements to make sure we hadn't gained too much weight, and I'd surely put some on. Last spring, I'd taken kickboxing as an elective, but when the class ended, so had my steady workouts. I'd barely set foot in a gym since then, and my healthy eating habits had plummeted. 26, Erin announced. Half an inch. Still, heavier girls worked at Babes. I wouldn't get cut tonight, but when I met Erin's gaze, I knew a lecture was coming. Ashley, who would be measured after me, offered a tentative smile. There would be no complaints about her. While I struggled to look good every shift, Ashley looked as if she'd come right out of Hollywood. She had a better figure than most of us, which she maintained with her dance classes and her abnormally fast metabolism. My friend was majoring in English, minoring in dance, and always joked that if grad school didn't work out, she could become a stripper. Her every curve was accentuated in the tight black shorts and the form-fitting white shirt, with just the barest hint of her petal pink eyelash lace bra flashing from beneath the fabric. That was all natural, too. I had to pad my bra just to meet Erin's standards. Ashley's makeup was impeccable and always trendy, and her sleek blonde hair never seemed to have a bad day. And despite Ashley being a total sweetheart, I always felt embarrassingly plain and underwhelming beside her. My one saving grace was my hair. When I didn't have it pulled back, it fell into a fountain of thick chestnut curls that came halfway down my back. I expect you to lose that inch by next month, Noelle. You can't be a whale and work here, Erin said. Heat rushed to my face, but I bit back a sharp retort. As demeaning as this job was, it paid the bills. Yes, ma'am, I said. Erin reached down and plucked at the shiny dancer's tights that all of us were required to wear. They were pretty comfortable in the winter, but during the summer, those tights were nothing short of torture. These are getting too thin, too. I expect a new pair soon. I couldn't afford new tights, and unfortunately, this was my best pair. It was the only one without runs or picks in it. I swallowed as I mentally worked through my budget for the next week. Erin liked a very specific kind of tights, and they cost $30. I didn't have nearly that much. I'll make sure I get them. Erin nodded. I just can't have you looking like a cheap whore. Very classy, Erin. And you must make a better effort with your makeup from now on. Your concealer is too red for your complexion and it's doing nothing to cover up the bags under your eyes. I want a different eyeshadow, too. I don't know why you thought pink would look good. She was the one who suggested the pink eyeshadow. It made my brown eyes look lighter, she'd said. Inwardly, I bristled. Really, I ought to be used to Erin's game by now. She always contradicted herself. Blue, Erin said. And you need to do something different with your eyeliner. I want a proper cat eye, not whatever it is that you've got going on now. All jobs are crappy. And this wouldn't be forever. Someday I'd be a biologist, a botanist, or an entomologist. Then I could wear tank tops and jeans every day. I could just pull my hair back and throw on the first clean thing I found. The plants and insects sure wouldn't care. I could dress how I wanted, without someone criticizing every single detail of my appearance. You're good to go on the floor, Erin said, jerking her head. Next time I expect more effort, Noelle. I flashed her my best smile. I promise you'll get it. Erin nodded curtly. You'd better. Ash, you're next, she said, wielding her measuring tape. Although I hated to leave my friend with her, I felt a cold sort of relief that Erin's attention was turned away from me. Besides, Ashley didn't have anything to worry about. She was a total bombshell. I checked for my tables and grabbed my notepad beside the register. As usual, people turned out for Port St. John's nightlife. The noise rose around me in a cacophony of shouts and cheers, accompanied by the smell of beer and chicken wings. Together, I'd always thought the two smelled like vomit, but then, I'd never been one for either beer or wings. Beer tasted like urine-soaked bread that had been left out in the sun for about a week. Not that I'd ever drank urine, but by trying beer, I was pretty sure that was what it tasted like. And the wing sauce at Babe's was so oily, you could probably start a fire with it. At my first table sat 6 guys still in their football jerseys, proudly declaring their love for the University of Galvez. I felt a twinge of envy at the easy confidence they exuded. Despite being fellow college students, they clearly weren't stressed over fast-approaching midterms. Or if they were, they felt good enough about them to go out and eat. I'd spent every spare second, including breaks and drives home, trying to cram for world literature, my arch-nemesis and the bane of my existence. "Hey guys," I said in my best customer service voice. "Welcome to Babe's. I'm Noelle, and I'll be your server tonight. Would you like to hear our specials?" The guy nearest me, tall, fair-haired with green eyes, smirked and leaned forward over the table. "Are you one of them?" he asked. So, they were those kinds of football players. Fantastic. "Very clever, sir. I've never heard that one before." "Ooh." The player across from him grinned and tossed his long brown hair. "She's mouthy." I clenched my jaw and deposited the menus onto the table. "Drinks?" They kept grinning at me with the exact same condescending, conniving smile, as if they were part of some sort of frat boy Borg. "What would you recommend?" Blondie asked. This felt like a trap, but I wasn't sure what it was exactly or how to avoid it. "We have a great selection of beers," I said. "You can see them, on the table there." I nodded to the beer and wine list. One of the guys snagged it and made a show of reading it over. "It might be easier for me to make my decision if you read them to me," one of the guys said. The blonde boy smirked. "What do you like, Noelle?" "I don't drink," I replied. "I'm too young." That wasn't entirely true. I was only 19, but occasionally I swiped a glass of wine or a bottle of hard cider from the fridge at home. These doofuses didn't need to know that, though, and I'd long since learned that guys didn't understand subtlety. You had to tell them no, in absolutely no uncertain terms. Otherwise, they'd assume you were head over heels in love with them. "What a boring life you must lead," the guy closest to me said. "Maybe you ought to let us buy you around. We can make room for you." He shifted over and patted the empty space beside him. "You're not my type," I said dryly. "I'll come back for your drinks." As I left, their snickers followed me. My cheeks burned. What douchebags. I thought uncomfortably of Cedric, my mom's newest in a long string of boyfriends. The most charitable thing I could say about him was that he didn't beat on either of us, like a few of my mom's previous boyfriends had. Truly a high standard. Mom had been handed a really crappy lot in life. After getting pregnant at 16, she'd been kicked out of the house by her parents. But her life hadn't been the sort of inspirational, poor kid overcomes all odds and becomes fabulously wealthy. No, my mom's story was the kind that no one wanted to celebrate, or even really talk about. And sometimes, I blamed myself for making my mom's life hard, for forcing her to spend all those years struggling to support me, which was why I tried so hard to take care of her. Even if I knew it was irrational, sometimes I still felt like the teenage pregnancy that ruined my mom's life. On the bright side, dealing with Cedric taught me how to handle jerks without losing my temper. All I had to do was make it through my shift. 8 hours and done. Then I could go home and study for world literature. I bit my lip as I thought of everything on the list. Even though it was barely halfway through the semester, world literature had already covered at least 6 different authors. And Dr. Simmons promised that passing her midterm would require having an in-depth knowledge of everything we'd read so far. Or, sort of read. I'd gotten most of my knowledge from Wikipedia and SparkNotes. I just didn't get English at all. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get anything from a novel, much less a poem. It was like my mind just didn't work that way. When I walked into the kitchen, Ashley offered me a wry, sympathetic smile. "If it makes you feel any better," she said quietly. "Aaron took issue with my nails." I glanced at Ashley's nails. Painted nicely, but cut off very short. Ashley couldn't bear to keep her nails long at all, or she'd pick and tear at them until they made her cuticles bleed. "She wants us all to have femme fatales," I quipped, mimicking scratching someone's eyes out. It's a miracle she hasn't blinded herself. How do you think she puts on her fake lashes with those Wolverine claws? Ashley grinned and retrieved 2 beers from the bar. "Practice, I guess." "Good luck tonight." "Same to you," I said. I glanced at my section, but thus far, only the frat boy brigade was there. They'd probably poke fun at me all night and leave me an insultingly small tip, no matter how hard I tried. But still, it was worth a try. I was many things, but I'd never been one for giving up. Although Babes closed at 2 in the morning, Aaron didn't let us go until 4. Numb and tired, I trudged to my car. She wasn't much, just a 20-year-old Chevy Cavalier, with paint peeled so badly that you'd have been hard-pressed to realize she'd once been forest green instead of dingy gray. Neither her heat nor her air worked. The check engine light had been on for years. And at my last oil change, the mechanic informed me that my battery was due to go out at any time. But she was mine. I called her Margaret, after the Victorian lepidopterist Margaret Fontaine. Her butterfly research was legendary, and a constant reassurance that someday, my work would be worth something too. My poor battered car had seen me all the way through high school and the first year of college. Now, hopefully, she'd see me through my 3rd semester. Ashley threw an arm around my shoulders and pulled me against her as we walked across the sand-swept pavement. The ocean waves roared behind us. "How do you feel about Acosta's pre-calc midterm tomorrow?" "Oh, I've got that down," I said. "I'm more worried about World Lit. I remember the Epic of Gilgamesh, and that's literally it." "Seriously? That was the first thing we read." I shrugged, genuinely a bit embarrassed. Although I always resolved to improve each semester, by early September, my careful time management inevitably burst into flames, and it was all downhill from there. I remember the Portrait of Dorian Gray. That's the one with the guy who sells his soul and his picture ages instead of him. I only remembered that because I'd watched the movie of it. Hopefully that was good enough. "The Picture of Dorian Gray," Ashley corrected. "Picture. Isn't that the one where it's by Lord something?" "Ah, yes," Ashley deadpanned. "How could I forget about the great artistic contributions of Lord something to the canon? I'm a failure as an English major." I playfully shoved her away. "Rude! You know what I mean. The one who took his bear to college, the gay one? First of all, it was written by Oscar Wilde, who was not a lord. But you're right, he was gay. Surely you remember learning about all that? We had a class where we all looked at the pictures of Wilde's lover and we were all very underwhelmed?" Ashley asked. "Because on a scale of 1 to 10, Oscar Wilde was a 10, easily. And his boyfriend was more like a 5, maybe a 6, if you squinted." I pulled on my ponytail holder and ran my fingers through my hair. coaxing apart the thick curls. Come to think of it, I did vaguely remember learning about Oscar Wilde's sodomy trial. Ashley sighed. The bear man was Lord Byron, who is the patron saint of bisexuality. Uh-huh. I'm not Catholic, but I'm pretty sure there's not a patron saint of bisexuality. Well, he's my patron saint, Ashley amended. #goals, whatever, minus the syphilis. Cambridge wouldn't let him take his dog to college, so he took his bear and tried to make it a fellow of the college. He died in Messalongi trying to liberate Greece from the Turks. Oh, that guy. I actually did remember that. Ashley had thought it was very heroic the way Byron had gone down. I doubted I'd remember that tomorrow, though. He wrote, "She walks in darkness," right? I asked, tentatively. Almost. "She Walks in Beauty" and "Darkness" are 2 separate poems. But Dr. Simmons might give it to you anyway, it's close enough. I sighed and leaned back against my car. I'm doomed. Ashley shook her head and drummed her fingers against Margaret's dull paint. Our coworkers filed out, clad mostly in light jackets and jeans, their babes' uniforms thrown into backpacks and bags. Erin's policy demanded that we never wear our babes' uniforms outside of the bar, so we always changed when we left. My own uniform was thrown into my backpack, crammed in with my textbooks and a pile of crumpled papers. I'd happily traded it for my fleece pajama pants and a tank top. After all, why bother getting dressed just to change into my pajamas when I got home? You're not doomed, Ashley said. It's not like math or something where you have to find one exact answer to be right. Maybe that was why I'd had so much trouble with it. I liked knowing there was one exact answer. Half of it is going to be multiple choice, and the other half is going to be short response and essay. Just make stuff up. I grinned. Lord Something wrote the Epic of Gilgamesh when he was studying at Cambridge majoring in bear riding. Then he died of the bubonic plague after being struck by a laundry van in Paris. After his death, someone published his sonnets about Mephistopheles, and lots of ladies swooned over them while checking in on Emperor Augustus's corpse to make sure he hadn't become a saint. Ashley looked as if she'd died a little inside. Try to do a little better than that? At least make up a lordly-sounding name? Lord Darcy, I offered, attempting a British accent. Ashley shook her head. Have a good night, she said. Maybe after all our midterms are done, we should go out for Mexican. Go celebrate, you know? I furrowed my brow. If I can find the time. Ashley's face fell. Noelle, make sure you're taking some time out for yourself every now and then. Don't spend so much time caring about everyone else that you don't take care of yourself. I'm far too selfish for that. But that's the problem. You aren't. When was the last time you went out just for fun? All you do is go to school and work. I sighed. Do we have to rehash this argument now? Ashley pursed her lips together. Noelle, you will never really figure out who you are staying with your mom. I'll just say it. I get that her laugh was hard. I get that society totally screwed your mom over, okay? Like, it's not her fault. She was born in crappy, disadvantaged circumstances. I took social problems too, I replied. Come on, Ash, I know how poverty works. I just want you to know that it's not your responsibility to take care of her, Ashley said. Maybe she needs help, but she also takes advantage of you, and you deserve to go out and have fun every now and then. For God's sake, she spent your entire financial aid refund in 3 days. You didn't even get to buy anything with it, and ended up scraping money together just to buy your textbooks. She needed it for bills. Ashley sighed. Don't you think you should know what bills you're paying since you're the one really paying them? I shook my head. She had no idea what she was talking about. But I kept my mouth shut. I was tired, and I didn't feel like fighting this now. Ashley moved away from my car and over to hers, a brand new Nissan Versa. She'd gotten it through a stroke of luck after a woman totaled Ashley's old Kia. The insurance company had given my friend just enough for a down payment, and she'd had the credit to get something good instead of total crap. Already, she'd taken to covering that back window with a half a dozen decals featuring literary quotes, unicorns, and a mixed assortment of her favorite Pokémon. "Be careful," Ashley exclaimed, waving her farewell. "You too." I opened my car door and climbed inside. I started my car and cranked up the radio to keep myself awake. Although I'd been going all night, my car seemed to have some peculiar power over me. The instant I hit the seat, my eyes began to burn and droop. Fortunately, home was only a couple of miles away. As I pulled away from the parking lot, I swerved to miss the giant pothole. I'd hit it too hard once, and the impact was so strong, it had cracked my windshield in half. This late at night, there was almost no one out. When I pulled onto Gulf Waters Parkway, one of the busiest streets in Port St. Joan, it was empty, save for my coworkers and me. Ashley boldly raced through the red light in her eagerness to get home. Now, do I stay up and study, or try to wake up early and do it? I roughly rubbed a hand across my eyes, trying to force the burn away from them, but to absolutely no avail. And my bed would be so soft and warm. If I was lucky, Faraday, the family cat, would deign to join me and keep my feet warm. But would I seriously get up early enough to study? I tried that sort of thing before, and 9 times out of 10, I turned off my alarm and went back to sleep. The light turned red. I pulled on the brakes and came to a screeching halt. I looked around and frowned. There were literally no other cars at this intersection except for mine. It was stupid to even stop, especially when I just needed to turn left. I gazed longingly at Cortez Drive. It would be so simple to just turn anyway and race home, but this light had cameras, and the absolute last thing I needed was a ticket. "These closing shifts suck," I muttered, rubbing my eyes again. I never actually saw the light change. 1 second it was red, and the next it was green. I pressed the gas and turned the corner, eager to be home. Forget the damn English test. I was going to be either an entomologist or a botanist. And when I went to apply for grad school, I seriously doubted anyone would care that I'd gotten a C in world literature. I was going straight to bed, and I'd take my chances for getting up early enough to study. Just as I hit the gas, a white blur darted in front of my car. It was a huge animal of some kind, a cat, a dog, a possum. I didn't know, and I didn't have time to think. I slammed on the brakes and jerked the steering wheel out of reflux. Thud! I froze and put my car into park. I hit something. Panicked, I burst from my car. My pulse thundered, and my heart wedged itself in my throat. I steeled myself, preparing for the worst. God, I'd hit some poor animal, killed it or wounded it. I swallowed hard and peered around the back of my car. There was nothing there. I frowned and edged around the side of my car, looking around and underneath it. I'd seen something. I knew I had. I'd heard my car hit it. But there was no dead or wounded animal behind my car. I didn't see any evidence of one having run into the grass to my right, either. Just to be sure, I grabbed my phone from the center console and edged into the grass, sweeping the light over the ground. Nothing. I squinted into the darkness, searching for signs of movement, but there were none. Maybe I hadn't seen anything after all. I was pretty tired. I suppressed a shiver and absent-mindedly rubbed my forearms. There was nothing out here, except for my rumbling car and me. 2. I didn't study for the English midterm, and no matter how much information Ashley graciously tried to cram into my head 5 minutes before the exam began, I knew I'd bombed it, and that midterm was 15% of my grade. Assuming I'd made a 50 on it, That meant I would probably pull a C out of the class, possibly a B, if the professor was generous when grading my participation. There was still half the semester left, so it wasn't exactly the end of the world, but it didn't feel very good either. I parked my car and trudged toward the apartment I shared with Mom, and with alarming and increased frequency, with Cedric. World literature was the bane of my existence. Meow. I turned to the sound and smiled. Stray cats roamed the apartments, and when I could afford to spare a few dollars, I bought bags of food for them. It wasn't much, just a cup or so a day, but that was surely better than nothing. This particular cat was the runt, smaller and more skittish than the others. He stayed in the tree nearest to my apartment building and waited for me to return each day. And when I did, he'd climb down for pets and treats. And I could use some company right now. Slowly, the cat inched his way down the tree. After he descended a couple feet, he turned and ran down. With his tail raised, the cat made quick, delicate steps towards me. I knelt in the damp grass, despite the wetness seeping through my jeans. The cat bumped his head against my hand and twisted, so my fingers scratched his chin. "Hey, boy," I muttered. "How are you today?" As I resumed my walk to the apartment, the cat followed, making little chirp-like meows. There was no wondering what he wanted. I pulled open the plastic tub that I kept outside the door of our apartment. Inside, I kept bags of cat food. Today, there was only a one, and it was a sad, mostly empty bag. I'll need tights and cat food. Already my budget looked tight, and I'd gotten paid only a week ago. Still another week to go before I'd get another check. I'd figure it out. I always did. The bills came first, then the cat's. I poured the cat's bowl full, and he hungrily dove into the red-brown pieces of food. I scratched between his ears once more, before unlocking the front door of the apartment. It wasn't the worst place to live, but it wasn't really the best either. The bathroom and kitchen were both so tiny you could barely turn around in them. But the bedroom was decently sized. The living room, too. At least, they were, when it was just Mom and me. Now, we had Cedric, who kept forcing his way in like an invasive species. Cedric was like a lionfish, or a python in the Everglades. Unfortunately, I doubted the Fish and Wildlife Service was going to implement plans to remove the Cedric pestilence anytime soon. Mom stepped out of the bedroom, clad in a pink bathrobe. I could see her hard life mapped across her face, in the deep wrinkles and the dark circles beneath her eyes. Her skin was taut and withered in places, but puffy in others. Mom's hair was thick and light brown like mine, but at the moment, it was wet and clung to her shoulders like seaweed. When Mom was a teenager, she'd look just like me, except for her eyes. Hers were blue and mine were brown. My eye color was a gift from my father, whoever he was. Mom had offered so much contradictory information about my father over the years that I wasn't sure she even knew who he was. Guilt pricked my chest. Mom had been through a lot, and maybe I ought to dredge up some goodwill towards Cedric. I could kind of see why Mom might like him. He was a decently attractive man in a good old Southern boy kind of way. Dirty blonde hair, blue eyes, and a strong jaw. Definitely more attractive than most of her boyfriends. But his looks were about all he had going for him. Summoning up goodwill for him was hard when he sauntered out of Mom's bedroom in a stained wife-beater, smelling like he'd just crawled out of the gutter. Cedric didn't have a job. Literally, all he did was drink and mooch off my mom. You'd think he could at least take his clothes to the laundromat every now and then, but no. Instead, Cedric littered his clothes all over Mom's apartment, and probably his, and once a month, he piled them all up and brought them over for me to wash. Mom tucked a long strand of hair behind my ear and gently traced her finger along the lobe of my ear. Ever since I was a little girl, she'd greeted me that way, by brushing back my hair and tracing the shape of my ear. I'd asked her why she did it once, and she told me the habit developed when I was 2, after I'd gotten my ears pierced. Her touch was the only thing that kept me from crying at the itching and swelling of my lobes. "Hi, sweetie. How was school?" "Terrible," but I didn't want her to worry about me. "Fine. It was just an English test," I said. "I just have biology and pre-calc left. Then I'll be done." "Good," Cedric said. "Then you can pick up some extra shifts at work, help pay for things." Or maybe he could try finding a job and help pay for things, instead of letting my mom's sad disability check, my financial aid refund, and me carry all 3 of us. Cedric grinned and tossed my backpack further down the sofa so he could sit by Mom. He wrapped an arm over her shoulders and grinned at her. "I might be able to get you a gig, too," Cedric added. "I've got a friend who's looking for a couple of waitresses." "So we could be co-workers?" I asked, as if Cedric would ever deign to work in a position as lowly as a server. Cedric's easy smile never wavered. "I only have the patience to deal with one stupid person, and that's my damn ex-wife. I could never take a customer service job. I'd kill someone." "Is she still bothering you?" Mom asked. Cedric rolled his eyes. "It's completely ridiculous. I see the kid every other weekend and make sure she's got food when she's at my apartment. And the bitch still thinks I ought to pay child support? Bad fathers are supposed to pay child support. I'm not a bad father. But you know what? Let her take me to court. I don't have a job. She can't get a dime from me." Boy, were his standards for a good father low. Worse, Mom nodded sympathetically, clearly taking Cedric's side. After what happened to her, you'd think Mom would have been a little more sympathetic to a single mom and her kid. But no, she must truly love Cedric, because she never seemed to notice his flaws. "Keep your legs closed, Noelle," Cedric said, "so you don't turn into a gold-digging whore like her." Classy. Maybe Cedric and Aaron could get together. They seemed like they have a lot in common. And then, things could go back to what they had been. Just Mom and me. "Noted," I said dryly. "Good girl." I bristled at being called a girl, like I was a dog or something. "Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, you're going to be out of school, right. If you can't pick up some extra shifts from work, you could help around here more," he added. "Make things easier on your mom, right, Yvain?" My mom shook her head. "Noelle is doing fine, 40 hours a week plus tips. But maybe she could look at taking a second job during the holidays. Everyone will be hiring." Cedric nodded, "Just making sure things are good for you, princess." "Things are good for me," Mom said, "especially now that you're here. I don't know what Noelle and I would do without you." Survive. The same as we always did before Cedric showed up. Faraday clambered beneath the table and rubbed against my ankles, giving Cedric a distrustful look. Yet another reason to dislike the man. Faraday and the stray cats all hated Cedric, and I'd never met a better judge of character than a cat. Actually, every animal I'd ever met hated Cedric. Even the unusually friendly squirrels who scampered around outside hated him. They'd come within arm's reach of my mom and me, but if Cedric was around, they always fled. "The kitchen could use a good deep clean," he said. "The bathroom, too." But God forbid Cedric do any of those things. "I'll put it on my to-do list," I said dryly. "I'll have to see what Erin does first. She has a tendency to put the schedule together last minute." "Are you going to work tonight?" Cedric asked. I clenched my jaw. It wasn't that I hated doing things for my mom, I didn't. But nothing bothered me more than having to do what Cedric said. especially knowing that he couldn't even be bothered to buy cleaning supplies, so someone else could pick the place up. And after a long night that had only ended early this morning, followed by an English midterm that I knew I'd failed, the absolute last thing I wanted to do was spend my evening cleaning the apartment up, while he sauntered around, beer in hand, and criticized what I was doing. "Yeah," I said. "I took an extra shift." Mom smiled softly. "You work so hard, Noelle. That's my good girl. So responsible." Of course I did. Because she'd walked out on her job 3 years ago and hadn't been able to find one. And Cedric considered all work beneath him. "I do my best, Mom," I muttered. Now I had to actually leave and stay away. Otherwise, my lie would be found out. I grimaced. Really, I should have tried to come up with something else, but I knew that the only excuses Cedric was willing to buy were school and work. If I'd said anything else, Cedric would have insisted that I stay at home, and he'd bring Mom in to guilt-trip me over it. Cedric would push Mom until she caved, too, like always. I walked into the bedroom closet. My clothes had once been hung alongside Mom's, but they'd recently been moved into plastic tubs on the floor. I grabbed my uniform, returned to the living room, and shoved the clothes into my backpack. "I'll be gone until early in the morning," I said. Mom drifted into the kitchen and began pouring a glass of Merlot. "Okay, honey. Be safe." "Make sure you flash your boobs," Cedric said, grinning. "Make good tips." A real class act indeed. I glanced at Mom. As she returned to the sofa, she swatted at Cedric's chest, but didn't correct him. Just once, it would have been nice to have Mom say something. But I wouldn't hold my breath. As I left, I pulled out my phone and texted Ashley. "Hey girl, are you still up for hanging out?" A toad jumped across the pavement, and with a sigh, I tucked my phone away. The poor thing was probably going to get hit by a car. I winced when I thought of the animal I'd nearly hit on my way home from work. Even if I hadn't actually run over the cat, dog, or whatever it was, I'd probably scared it half to death. I crouched close to the pavement as the toad steadily hopped away from me. "Come on now," I murmured. "I'm not going to hurt you." I carefully placed a hand in front of the toad, and when it tried to back away, I scooped it up. The toad was cold and slimy between my hands, and it struggled fiercely, trying to free itself. I quickly crossed the pavement, heading to the brush-lined drainage dish that bordered the apartments. That was probably where the little guy had come from. Carefully, I worked my way down the steep slope, stepping over brambles and through weeds. Once I was sure the frog wouldn't just hop back onto the pavement, I crouched down and released him. He hopped down and vanished beneath the dying leaf litter. I straightened and smiled. Sometimes I wish I could disappear like that too. It must be nice. My phone beeped, so I pulled it from my pocket and checked the message. "I'm always ready to party." A second message arrived, featuring a row of smiling emojis. At least I had something to do. I quickly typed out a message and hit send. "Count me in, Ash. Let's do this." As we walked to the sorority house, music blared through the air. By 9 o'clock, the party was in full swing. Ashley's face, carefully made up with highlighter and bright red eyeshadow, brightened. Her feet quickened, and her silver stilettos moved in a nearly feverish pace against the concrete. For the occasion, I'd let Ashley dress me and make me up. We weren't exactly the same size, but we were close enough that I could wear some of her stuff. She'd chosen a low-cut red satin dress for me. It hugged my hips, smoothed out my belly, and added some volume to my non-existent chest. The dress was comfortable and flashy, very different from my preferred outfits of jeans and t-shirts. My eyes were rimmed with gold eyeshadow and eyeliner, both applied by Ashley's practiced hand. and mercifully, Ashley loaned me a pair of heels that weren't unmanageably high. I still walked with all the grace of a newborn foal, but it wasn't torturous. And when I stood still, my bare legs did look pretty darn good. Too bad I couldn't just dress up nicely and hang around Ashley's house. The closer we came to the house, the more out of my element I felt. When was the last time I'd been out for something like this? I hadn't had a girls' night in forever, and I hadn't gone to prom. God, had it really been my middle school homecoming dance? Yes. Mom's then-boyfriend had been a man twice her age, and he'd had a 20-year-old daughter. She'd taken me to the mall to get a dress, and she'd straightened my hair in her dorm. I couldn't remember her name or anything else about her, except that she was in the military. That was the last time I'd gone out and had fun like this, dressed up nicely with another girl. My chest ached. Was it selfish to feel as though, by taking care of Mom, I'd missed something crucial? I should have called to see if Aaron needed extra help, I said. I could have worked tonight. Ashley seized my arm and pulled me alongside her. The silver sequins of her mini dress scratched against my bare arm. Ashley looked stunning, but I knew those sequins were probably going to rub the inside of her arms raw by morning. No, you shouldn't have. Girl, as hard as you work, you deserve this, okay? I swallowed around the lump in my throat. I don't even like frat boys. It won't be all frat boys, Ashley said, her voice tinged with mischief. There are bound to be some pretty sorority girls, too. You know I'm not into girls, I said, feeling my cheeks warm. Shame. But more for me, I suppose. There are some benefits to batting for both teams. Ashley mimed swinging a bat at an imaginary ball. I shook my head. So you plan to abandon me for either a frat boy or a pretty girl? Noted. Well, let's see what happens, Ashley asked. Maybe you'll pick up a nice frat boy, too. I hadn't dated a guy since high school. Part of that was because I was always so busy. The other part was that I had issues with boys. It wasn't that I hated them or anything like that, but having seen my mom's string of failed relationships had left a sour taste in my mouth. And there were still the stories of my stepdad. Out of my mom's string of boyfriends, she'd only married once, and it had been disastrous. When Mom first got together with Jake, I was about 5. She'd insisted that he was wonderful, caring and loving, but after they married, he turned into a monster. When I was 7, he pushed me over a heater, which left a burn on my cheek that never entirely healed. The small mark could easily be mistaken for just a bit of hyperpigmentation or an acne scar, but I still stared at it every time I saw my reflection. It was a mark of shame, reminding me how Jake had beaten my mother while I hid in the closet, buried beneath coats and linens. Mom always hid me, so I'd be safe from him at his worst. It was a blessing when he walked out, even if it broke my mom's heart. She loved him, despite all the awful things he did to us both. And that sort of twisted attachment terrified me. So more than anything, I feared meeting a nice guy, getting involved with him, and then watching him turn into an abusive monster. I don't know about that, I said, but I'll definitely be your wing woman. Great. Ashley wrapped her arm around mine. The scent of her pumpkin spice perfume curled into my nose as we stepped over the sidewalk and entered the sorority house. Music exploded in my ears, accompanied by the heady odor of beer and sweat, mixed with salty air and vanilla air freshener. The doorway was packed with girls in short party dresses and guys in polos and khakis. I resisted the urge to dig my nails into Ashley's arm like a lifeline. "Let's go, girl," Ashley exclaimed. "Leave your worries at the door." Ashley spun around and grabbed my hands, pulling me into the throng of people. She swayed her hips, her sequins flashing and twinkling with every movement. I tentatively returned her smile and edged forward, letting her coax me into an offbeat dance. We edged towards the middle-aged DJ, whose playlist seemed to be stuck in the 80s, and his giant speakers. Relax, relax. You don't ever go out like this. For just one night, be someone whose only worries are school and work. Be someone without until very recently, horribly sick mother and memories of abusive boyfriends and a deadbeat father. Just be Noelle Fidelis, college student. What could possibly be wrong with that? 3. Ashley raised her arms over her head and rocked her hips, effortlessly keeping time with the music. Her blonde hair, styled into soft curls, bounced with every movement. I stayed near her, swaying in time with the music as best as I could. With a grin, Ashley sashayed to me and dipped toward the ground before snapping up like a snake. She turned around, putting her back to me, and slowly grinded against me. What was I supposed to do? Another girl approached Ashley and put her back to her. I bounced awkwardly as Ashley and the other girl rubbed against one another. Did anyone else realize how much of an imposter I really was? I didn't even know how to dance. A couple of guys bounded over, practically leaping towards us. Just as they joined Ashley and the sorority girl, I slipped away. I retreated to the wall and watched as the four of them writhed together like an 8-armed beast. The thought of a guy bumping against me like that? I reflexively grabbed a can of Diet Coke and popped it open. I didn't even like Diet Coke, but as I swallowed, the carbonated water felt steadying, real. And the can gave me something to do with my hands, so I didn't just sit against the wall while everyone else partied around me. I probably need therapy to sort some of this crap out. But the thought of going to therapy wasn't a comfortable one. I'd heard horror stories from my classmates who'd gone to the school counselors, since we all got 5 free visits per semester. At best, those therapists seemed well-meaning, but incompetent. At worst, they were super out of touch with what it was actually like being a poor, overworked college student. Ashley always burned through her free visits, but although she'd tried several therapists throughout the semester to help manage her depression, she still hadn't found a good fit. I doubted I'd have better luck. Ashley noticed I'd left and came to join me. The girl and the 2 guys moved closer to one another and kept dancing, as if she hadn't left. Ashley rounded to my side, snagging a bottle of water off the nearby table. Her face was flushed, and her eyes bright. Her brow furrowed when she saw me. "Are you all right?" I'd told Ashley about my mother and Cedric. We'd talked about them a lot, and our conversations usually devolved into fights with Ashley insisting I ought to move out. My friend just didn't get it. She didn't know what it was like to take care of a mother. But I'd never directly mentioned how nervous boys made me. Still, Ashley was more observant than most, and it was clear she was trying to draw me out of my shell. "I'm fine," I said. "Go enjoy yourself. Don't worry about me." "I am enjoying myself," Ashley replied. "I needed a break anyway. So much dancing. After I down this bottle of water, I might try finding my shoes." I glanced at Ashley's bare feet and the red marks left by her strappy heels. I still wore my shoes, although I also hadn't danced as strenuously as she had. Ashley paused to fluff her curls. "Oh, look," she murmured, arching her back and smiling sultrily. I curled my fingers into the can of Diet Coke as 2 frat boys approached. They were handsome, tall, and broad-shouldered. One guy had brown blonde hair, spiked up in the front. He wore a red polo shirt and khakis like most of the other guests. His friend had sleek black hair pulled back into a ponytail and autumn brown skin. I doubted they'd give me a second glance normally, but maybe tonight, looking like a glamorous femme fatale, they would be interested. My stomach churned from some strange mingling of pleasure and worry. It's not like I have to sell my soul to one of them. That isn't what Ashley is going to do. Ashley just wanted to get laid. She probably even hid a few condoms in her bra just in case. The blonde boy flashed a dazzling smile. "I haven't seen you girls around before," he said, his blue eyes flitting between my friend and me. "We don't come out much," Ashley said. "A pity," the blonde boy said. "I'm Travis. This is Alejo." Ashley smiled benevolently at Travis, like a medieval queen who deigned to listen to a peasant's complaints. "Ash," she said. "And Noelle, my best friend." "Nice to meet you," Travis said. Behind him, Alejo nodded. "You both look very beautiful tonight," Travis said. "Thanks, we know," I said, without thinking. Travis looked confused and his smile wavered. "It was just a compliment. You should just—" "I'm glad." Alejo cut in, his dark eyes solely on me. "Confidence is pretty sexy, too." Oh, he's smooth, very smooth, but it's going to take more than a few nice words to win me over. "Great dancing, by the way," Travis added, sounding as though he was trying to regain lost ground. "We saw you from across the room." "Funny, we didn't see you," I said, trying to sound flirtatious. From the irritated look Travis gave me, I had a feeling I'd really screwed it up. Or maybe he just wanted me to shut up so he could focus on flirting with Ashley. It was safe to assume she was the one he had his eye on from the way he kept smiling at her. Alejo elbowed Travis in the ribs. "She's right. Why don't you be a gentleman and dance for the lady's pleasure?" "Would that make you happy?" Travis asked, his gaze squarely on Ashley. My friend's lips curled into a sly, cat-like smile. "Only if you're good," she said. "If you're bad, don't bother." Travis attempted a very bad moonwalk and rolled his shoulders back in an apparent effort to be seductive. The result made him look like a rag doll, though, or a really cheap Halloween decoration caught in the wind. Alejo laughed. "Okay, God, stick with your day job, Travis. Dancing isn't for you, bro." Travis looked affronted. "I don't see you doing any better," he retorted, doing a very odd snapping thing with his hips. I glanced at Ashley, but her smile remained polite and unreadable. "I'm not the one who made a creepy comment," Alejo said, winking at me. Heat rushed to my face. Travis stopped dancing and bowed, his blue eyes searching Ashley's face for some sign of approval. My friend pursed her lips and hummed. "Well," she said, moving her hands up and down as if she was literally weighing the decision. "I suppose you weren't awful. You could definitely use some practice, though." "Maybe you want to show me?" Ashley's eyes shone brightly, and I knew Travis would be the guy she took home later, even if he wasn't nearly good enough for her. But he was handsome and probably decent in bed, and Ashley was pretty and wanted to get laid. At least they both know what they want and go for it, unlike me. I downed the rest of my Diet Coke as Travis and Ashley returned to the throng of dancers. "Did you want another one?" Alejo asked. I felt a flash of fear, thinking about all I'd heard of spiked drinks and date rape drugs, but the cans of Diet Coke were unopened. They should be safe. "Sure," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. With a smile, Alejo tossed me the soda and grabbed a can of Sprite. I opened my Diet Coke and took a sip, conscious of Alejo's eyes on me. "So, what's your major?" he asked. "Biology," I replied. "My minor is in astrophysics." Alejo whistled between his teeth. "Damn, that's way more impressive than me." "What are you majoring in?" I asked. "Drawing and painting. I'm a double major." "I see," I said. So, you're the sensitive artist type? That's a good major for you. Lots of nude models. Alejo toyed with the zipper on his black leather jacket, running it up and down along the teeth. They aren't usually very attractive, I'm sorry to say. But I've gotten really good at drawing other men's junk, so I guess there's that. I nearly choked on my drink as I let out a sputtering stream of coughs. Alejo grinned. What a useful skill, I rasped. Doubtlessly, Alejo said, his face serious. I can't wait to put that on my resume. Good at drawing men's junk, I replied. Truly irreplaceable on the job market. Quite. I settled more easily alongside Alejo and returned my attention to Ashley and Travis. She kept her arms raised over her head and pushed her chest out as she rocked her hips. Travis grinded against her. He kept one hand shamelessly on my friend's ass and the other on her upper back, just over where her bra was. I let my gaze flit back to my Diet Coke and shifted, uncomfortably. Alejo remained beside me, but he didn't speak. I glanced sideways at him, studying his strong jawline and the line of his shoulders. He was undeniably handsome, but everything was too hot and stuffy in here, too loud and too sharp. I glanced at Ashley, torn between the sudden need for fresh air and between my need to make sure Travis didn't try anything. So what are you? Alejo asked. Freshman? Sophomore. You? Same. Travis, too. He looks rather comfortable with your friend. I'm beginning to feel like a third wheel, Alejo said, with the hint of a laugh. Me too, I admitted. But at least Ashley was happy. There was that. And I supposed it was better than being stuck at home somehow. Ashley danced for hours. A few times I joined her, but my stamina was nothing compared to hers. My friend danced like her life depended on it, and although he seemed game to keep up with her, poor Travis's movements became sloppier and less on beat as time went on. When Ashley finally retreated from the dance floor, I saw Travis, who stood behind her, cast his eyes upward, as if thanking God for an end. Poor guy. He must really want to get laid, and I doubted Ashley failed to notice his declining stamina. Whether they were male or female, Ashley liked to make her hookups work for her. My friend didn't settle and didn't compromise, and no matter how badly she wanted to go home with someone, she always made sure her partners worked for their privilege. Alejo loped back to my side. He sucked on a candy cane, sharpening one end into a point. I ate them the same way, undeterred by the many times I'd pricked my tongue on one. I arched an eyebrow and wondered why he had candy canes already. It was only October. But maybe Alejo was one of those sort of people who started anticipating Christmas in August. I knew he couldn't be as charming or perfect as he pretended. I think I'm ready to go, Ashley said. How about you, Noelle? Dancing all night had made my friend's hair larger and her eyes brighter. Travis stood behind her, clearly trying to look nonchalant, but I caught the way he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. I pulled my phone out of my sequined clutch, borrowed from Ashley, and checked the time. It was 2 a.m. I nodded. Yeah, it's pretty late. I'm ready to head out. You? Ashley glanced at Travis. Yes, I think so. How about you come back to my place? Travis asked, right on cue. Ashley hummed as she pulled on her heels again. Her crystal blue eyes met mine, as if silently asking for permission. Despite knowing that the night would likely end this way, I had a sudden, selfish thought of insisting that she go back to her apartment with me, so we could continue our girls' night alone. You should go, Ash, I said instead. It'll be fun. Yeah, I guess it would be, she said. Cool, Travis said, wrapping an arm around Ashley's waist. It's in Kingswood, not far from here. What are you doing, Alejo? Alejo glanced at me. I'm going home, I said firmly. I think I will too, Alejo said slowly. Do you want me to walk you to your car, Noelle? It's too late to be really walking home alone. It was a nice offer, but what if he was just asking so he could get me alone? My car was parked at Ashley's apartment, about a 5-minute walk away, and a lot could happen in 5 minutes. We'd considered driving to the party, but parking at the university was always awful, especially on weekends. It would really make me feel better if you'd do that, Ashley said. I wondered if Ashley had done that on purpose, worded it so I'd feel like I was doing her a favor by letting Alejo walk me to my car. She was clever like that, and Ashley had probably anticipated my refusal. Above all else, my friend wanted me to be safe, and she knew I'd do anything to make her happy. If you don't mind, I said, relenting. That would be great, but if you don't, that's okay too. I wanted to give him an out, in case he wanted to stick around and try his luck on another girl. Alejo grinned. I think I can manage walking you to your car. Ashley wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and practically buzzing with excitement, she led me to the door. Text me so I know you've got home, she whispered. You have to text me too, I replied. I will, Ashley said, winking. Once we reached the sidewalk, Ashley dropped her arm from my shoulders and instead curled her hand around Travis's arm, gently squeezing his bicep. Alejo stood beside me, and to my relief, he remained a respectful distance away. See you later, bro, Travis called over his shoulder, already making his way down the sidewalk. I glanced at Alejo, who shook his head. Shameless, he muttered. Does he do this often? I asked, hesitantly. Take girls home? Oh, yeah. He's got the stamina of an ox. He'll show your friend a good time. I nodded, unsure whether or not I really should take that as assurance. So, lead the way, Alejo said, shoving his hands into his pockets. Let's get you back before your coach turns into a pumpkin. I set a slow pace, trying not to let Alejo linger behind me, despite the fact that I was supposed to be leading him. It's already past midnight, so if I'm Cinderella, my coach is already a pumpkin, I said. So, how do you intend to get home? I can't let you walk there. I'll climb on your back and you'll be my horse. Alejo chuckled. Well, he said, I don't know if that's the best idea in that dress and those heels, but I wouldn't dare say no. Oh? Sure. A woman with a fairy godmother probably isn't someone I want to cross. You might have her turn me into a snake or something. A snake? I asked. No, I'd at least let you be something cute, like a mouse. A mouse? You think they're cute? I shrugged. Sure. When they're small and fluffy, with their red-brown fur and their soft round eyes, I think those are cute. They're like mice from a storybook. So the next time one gets into the dorm room, I know who to call to catch it, Alejo mused. Absolutely, I said. If only I had your number, he said, a smirk playing on his lips. Smooth, and I'd walked right into it. I bit my lip, ignoring his comment. Once my car was in sight, I let myself relax just a little. I was almost there. Alejo hadn't turned into a serial killer or some sort of pervert, and I was almost at my car. This one's mine, I said, rounding to my Chevy Cavalier. Alejo flashed a bright smile, his teeth very white. Great. Hey, I was just kidding about the mouse thing. I know, I said, crossing my arms. How about you give me your phone and I'll put in my number, so you can call me, if you want, and if not, no hard feelings. I'll assume you're sweeping cinders out of a fireplace or whatever. I just had a good time with you tonight. You seem like someone worth knowing, and I'd like to get to know you better. He'd asked to give me his number, rather than having me give him mine. That way, I could choose whether or not to call him, without fear of him harassing me and being unable to take no for an answer. That was very gracious of him. Or else it was observant enough to realize how nervous I was. Either way, it's very gentlemanly. "Thank you for walking me to my car," I said. There was a lot more that I wanted to say. I wanted to explain that this was a big step for me, that I didn't trust guys even though I really wanted to. But I couldn't do it. It would be stupid to open up so much to someone I'd just met. But Alejo seemed to be a genuinely decent guy. "Anytime," he said. I unlocked the door of my car and climbed into the seat. Feeling unbelievably out of my element, I handed him my phone through the window. Alejo grinned, typed his number in, and gave it back to me. "So, maybe I'll hear from you?" he asked. "Maybe you will," I said. "Maybe you won't. I'll keep you in suspense." Alejo grinned. "Very well. I'll wait with bated breath." As I started my car, Alejo walked back to the curb and waved. I glanced at my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was his name, Alejo Moreno, accompanied by a number. I sucked in a sharp breath. It wasn't a commitment. I didn't have to call. My chest ached, my mind flashing with dozens of increasingly outlandish ways that this might backfire. He was nice, I whispered to my empty car. And I'm not going to be like Mom. I'm going to make good choices. I'd go home and go to bed. Then, when I woke up, I'd call Ashley and ask her about it. She was good with guys. She'd know what to do next. 4. I pulled my car into the parking lot of Palafox Apartments. For a second, I sat in my car and gathered myself. The evening was fun. Nice. Something warm fluttered in my chest. I climbed out of my car, taking my phone in one hand and my keys in the other. As I crossed the parking lot, I unlocked the screen and opened my Messenger app. Ashley had already texted. "Made it. Have a good night. Heart." I sighed in relief and texted her back with one hand. My muffled footsteps echoed in the empty space. I scowled as the overhead lights flickered off, leaving me in a patch of darkness. The landlord still hadn't fixed them. "Have a good night, Ash. I'm home, too." Send. Without warning, I struck something hard. Something standing in the middle of the empty parking lot, in the shadows, that I hadn't even seen. My phone flew out of my hand, and I stumbled over Ashley's heels. I gasped in a breath as my phone hit the pavement, hoping it wasn't broken. I snapped my head up, desperately trying to regain my balance. My blood seemed to freeze as I locked eyes with the young man before me. They were the same light crystal blue as Ashley's were, but Ashley's eyes were always bright and smiling. Her eyes were the sky on a cloudless day, and when Ashley was talking about English, her whole face lit up, her eyes brightening with boundless enthusiasm. There was none of that in this guy's eyes. Instead, they were like ice and sent a sharp, involuntary shiver crackling down my spine. Slowly, I noticed other features. He was about my age, and his face was all sharp angles, and his skin the palest milk white I'd ever seen. His skin tone stood in stark contrast with his night black hair. I doubted anyone would ever call him handsome, but he was pretty in a strange, otherworldly way. Certainly striking. The effect was immediately ruined when he opened his mouth. "Watch where you're going, you idiot," he snapped. It was as if he'd cast some sort of spell on me and rendered me speechless. I couldn't even raise my voice in protest. He swept away, stepping on my phone and grinding it into the concrete beneath his black combat boot, before continuing down the sidewalk. The sight of my mutilated phone on the pavement was like a trumpet blaring in my ear. Suddenly, the spell snapped, and everything came crashing down. "Asshole!" I shouted after him. "What's your problem?" Seething, I bent down and retrieved my phone. A long crack split the screen in half, but it looked like my case had kind of worked. This was salvageable, at least. I traced my finger over the broken split in the glass and scowled. My head jerked up as I prepared to give the son of a bitch a piece of my mind. But he was already gone. Then, without warning, strong fingers seized my arm and jerked me back. When I twisted around, pain jolted up my arm, all the way to my shoulder. I could tell it was him by the sickeningly sweet aroma. It smelled like dying flowers, but was probably some cheap macho body spray. How did he get behind me so quickly? "Excuse me?" he asked. "Did you say something?" I twisted my wrist, trying to free myself, but his grip tightened. Something sharp and hot, like lightning, burst through my arm. I clenched my jaw, refusing to show that he was hurting me. "Let go!" I shouted, deliberately raising my voice. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't see anyone around, but that didn't mean there wasn't. Someone might hear me. Port St. Joan wasn't some tiny beach town after all. It was a major port city on the Florida Panhandle, so there were always people around. Always. "Apologize," he growled in my ear. "Apologize?" I asked. "For what? You bumped into me." He smiled, thinly. "I don't take kindly to being called an asshole." "And I don't take kindly to being grabbed, you psycho." I moved into a fighting stance, and with as much force as I could, launched my foot forward. My borrowed heel gouged into his shin, and using the distraction, I twisted my wrist free. He fell back, hissing. In the streetlights, his eyes gleamed with fury. "Now get a move on before I call the police," I shouted. "You'll regret this," he said. His voice was cold and stern, as if he was delivering some deep prophecy. What a fucking creep. Abruptly, he turned on his heel and walked away. For a few seconds, I stood, my hands curled into fists, my legs shaking. I wanted to make sure he was really gone this time. So I waited until he vanished from view, before quickening my pace and retreating towards the apartments. He can't actually do anything to me, I told myself. He's just a weirdo who doesn't understand how to act like a freaking decent human being. I hadn't meant to run into him, and it surely didn't call for him breaking my phone like that. A shadow swept over the pavement before the apartment door, so large and sudden that I jumped. I froze, prepared to sock the jerk if he came back. But it was just a toad, its tiny body casting a looming shadow because it had jumped in front of one of the soft garden lights in the grass. I let out a nervous, breathless laugh and bent down. "You need to stay away from the pavement," I whispered. It looked like the same one I'd moved earlier, but it was hard to tell. They were rare this time of year. I glanced up to ensure the creep wasn't still lingering around. I didn't see him, but he could still be hiding in the shadows, watching. I ought to just dart into the apartment and lock the door. But if I woke up in the morning and realized that someone had stepped on the frog or run him over with a car, I knew I'd feel guilty. Besides, now I was close enough to the buildings that someone would definitely hear if I screamed. And I'll be damned before I let some creep dictate what I do. The frog croaked a response. I smiled, and after placing my phone beside the doormat, I scooped the small creature into my palms. This one didn't fight like the last one had. A chill tingled down my spine as it sat calmly in my palm, but it was probably in shock, poor thing. I'd just quickly put the toad back and then I'd climb into bed. I was not going to be psyched out by some probably drunken weirdo. Gingerly, I kicked off my borrowed heels and patted down the cold pavement. I squinted in the darkness, trying to find the brambles, as I carefully made my way down through the grasses and weeds. When I placed the toad on the ground, something hard pressed against my palm. The toad croaked from the ground gazing at me with large eyes. I tilted my hand, palm up, and frowned. There, resting in my hand, was a small gold ring, shaped like a tiara, and set with twinkling white stones. "How did you get this?" I whispered. The toad croaked again, as if that was an answer. I straightened and slipped the ring onto my middle finger. It fit well, which was surprising. My ring size was a ridiculously small 4.5, so rings never fit me. "Thank you," I said. The toad hopped away and splashed into the drainage dish. Weird. Very weird. But at least it wasn't the creepy psycho back for revenge. I cautiously climbed away from the weeds and brambles and back to the sidewalk. I rubbed my feet on the welcome mat before our apartment, grabbed my phone and borrowed shoes, and unlocked the door. My eyelids felt heavy. I really needed to go to bed. "Stupid creep," I muttered. I didn't recognize him, though, which meant he didn't hang around the apartments much, so I'd probably never see him again. Thank God for small mercies. I slipped inside the apartment, quietly closing the door behind me. In the darkness, I saw Cedric, sprawled over the sofa. Empty beer bottles littered the table before him. Where is Mom? I wondered. I stepped quietly into the bedroom, my eyes narrowing, as I looked at the bed. Empty. My gaze darted to the bathroom door and the strip of light beneath it. I sucked in a breath. I didn't expect Mom to be awake when I got home, and here I stood in Ashley's red dress and shimmering pumps. I'm 19, and if I wanted to go out with my friends, I should be able to. But at the same time, guilt rushed through me. I'd lied, and now I was caught red-handed. The door creaked open. I straightened my spine and waited as the light spread over me. Mom stepped from the bathroom, stopping abruptly to look at me. "Where have you... I thought you were at work." I gulped. "I was out with Ashley." You lied to me?" Mom asked. "Yes, I'm sorry," I said. Mom laughed. The sound too loud. I frowned and furrowed my brow, unsure what she thought was so hilarious about being lied to. Maybe she was a little buzzed. Mom went through a bottle almost every day, sometimes mixing it with the hydrocodone she got from Cedric, who got it from God knows where. "You're not mad?" I asked. "You sneaked out to a party or something? That's not so bad. I did my share of sneaking around when I was young, mostly with your father. Back then, he had this long hair that my parents absolutely loathed, and—" Mom cut off abruptly. "My father?" I asked. In all her stories about my father, she'd never mentioned him having long hair. Mom looked vaguely confused and flipped off the light. "Your father," she repeated. "Yes. When he was young, he had very long hair, I think. Maybe I'm mixing him up with someone else." She said that a lot. It was as if Mom had ideas about who my father was and what he was like, but nothing concrete had stuck in her mind. I tried not to look crestfallen. Mom ran her finger along my ear and kissed my forehead. "Just don't do this too often, or you won't want to get up for work. The bills have to get paid," she said. "Get in bed. It's late." As I pulled off Ashley's dress, I heard the creak of box springs as Mom climbed into our shared bed. She'd taken me lying abnormally well. Maybe she wasn't drunk. Maybe she was still mostly asleep, and the realization of what I'd said hadn't really sunk in. I fished a hanger from the closet and put Ashley's dress on it. Then I pulled on the first pair of pajamas I found. My father had long hair. Maybe. It was hard to know what Mom really knew. She'd tell me later that my father had been bald or kept his hair really short. But still, I tried to imagine it. I ran my fingers through my own hair. Just how long had his been? Was it halfway down his back like mine was, or Even longer? It was a stupid thing to worry about, but I couldn't help but linger on it. Maybe he'd been a decent human being back then. Maybe he'd been some scared kid, just like Mom. But whatever the circumstances, my dad had walked out of my life before I was even born, and he was never coming back. My wrists hurt. I yawned and rolled over in bed, my eyes opening a crack as I tried to get back to sleep. Metal scraped somewhere at the edge of my hearing. Probably Cedric. He never seemed to care that I worked until 2 a.m, and he was always obnoxiously loud. I groaned. My head felt too heavy and my mouth tasted of iron. I sat upright, blinking blearily. The blanket, for lack of a better word, was a threadbare stained piece of rough cloth, like burlap or something. I lifted my hand to grasp it, and my wrists ached. Handcuffs. But they weren't made of steel. Instead, the cuffs seemed forged of something gold-colored, maybe bronze. But oddly, I found no seams or breaks in the metal. It was as if they'd been forged right around my wrists. I raised my wrists, twisting them in the light. The handcuffs were still there, hard and unyielding. And already they'd left red, raised welts across my skin. I pulled hard, testing the chains between them, but that only made the cuffs dig in more harshly. If the metal hadn't hurt my wrists so badly, I'd have assumed this was all some terrible dream. What the fuck? I snapped awake, sitting up quickly and looking wildly around. This wasn't my bed. This wasn't my room. The walls were made of rough gray stone. The room looked to be square and was barely wide enough or long enough for the bed, and the bed wasn't exactly huge. At one end of the room, there was a wooden door, banded with a dull black-gray metal. Behind the bed, there was a window, set with round golden bars, through which I could see pale blue slats of the sky. My chest ached, and all my blood seemed to rush to my head. Where am I? What happened? I stepped gingerly onto the floor, which was made of something sleek and gray. My foot ached from where Ashley's shoes had left blisters, and I wasn't wearing my clothes. A sharp, shrill scream tore unbidden from my throat. My chained hands fumbled with the white cotton pants. This wasn't my shirt, either. It was the same color as the pants, and embroidered with H3157 in stark black thread. I backed against the wall, my head reeling. Someone changed my clothes. My pulse raced. Someone changed my clothes. The words somehow wouldn't register. I rushed mindlessly to the door and seized the knob, twisting and yanking. It didn't budge. Some distant part of me knew that was to be expected, but another, louder part of me seemed to have all the control, and that part wanted to rip the door off its hinges. But despite my best efforts, the door didn't budge. I stumbled back, my chest heaving. Was I shaking, or was it the room? I gulped greedily, trying to force air into my lungs. There didn't seem to be enough of anything. This wasn't my room, wasn't my bed, weren't my clothes, and all my thoughts crashed and collided so violently that my knees shook. I clambered over the bed and hauled myself up. I forced myself onto the balls of my feet so I could gaze out the tiny window. The glass was misty with inclusions, like melted wax, but I thought that I could see plants and sky beneath the dark bars. It looked as though I was on the side of a hill, or a mountain, and it looked as though I was just barely at ground level. There aren't any hills or mountains in Port St. Joan. Where the hell am I? I bolted from the window, tripping over the blankets. The mattress felt strange beneath my feet, all prickly and uneven. I edged into the corner, keeping my back to the wall and the door in my line of sight. What happened? What happened? What happened? My heart raced, the echo of its beats reverberating in my skull. This looked like a prison, but not quite. I didn't resemble the prisons I'd seen in movies with the bare tile floors and bunk beds. There weren't enough bars, and everything looked too old here. I searched my memories in a desperate bid for answers. The party with Ashley, Travis and Alejo, the jerk in the parking lot. I felt a sharp flash of fear. But no, that was completely irrational. I'd made it home. I distinctly remember talking to Mom. If someone had pulled me out of my room, I would have woken up, or Mom would have woken up. Even as useless as he was, Cedric took his Southern pride very seriously. He wouldn't just let someone break into the apartment and take me, not without filling my would-be abductor with half a dozen bullet holes. But what if whoever took me did something to them? Bile rose in my throat. I felt like I might vomit. Just in case, I searched for a toilet, but all I found was an empty pail. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled my knees up to my chest. Someone had brought me here, changed my clothes, and done who knows what else. I dropped my forehead to my knees and tried to fight back the wave of nausea that rose inside me. My eyes burned with tears. I rubbed them roughly away against my knees. Focus, Fidelis. What do you know? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was probably some creep's underground bunker. I'd been kidnapped, abducted, and sold to an international sex smuggling cabal. Just recently, the vice president of the university sent out an email about human trafficking on campus. Someone had passed around flyers and made posts on Facebook about an alleged human trafficker. And after the university police department was flooded with calls, the university had to step in and ask people to stop calling. There was no proof of any human traffickers on campus. There never had been. Human traffickers didn't usually grab people out of thin air, especially people with friends and schedules. They didn't go for people who'd be missed. Instead, they groomed you and tried to gain your trust first. I sucked in a deep breath. What if it hadn't been a hoax? But no, that was ridiculous. I'd made it home, where something terrible happened. I choked back a sob. Whatever this was, I had to be strong. But all I really wanted was to take a bath in boiling hot water so I could scrub every inch of me. Someone changed my clothes. I shuddered. What else had they done? Groped me? Or worse? I tipped my head back against the wall and drew a quick, shaky breath. No, it wouldn't do to think like that. If I thought like that, I'd only upset myself. I needed to pull myself together so I could survive whatever this was. Just survive. One moment at a time. Remember to breathe. I could do that much at least. Click. Across the room, the doorknob turned.
If you enjoyed this short sample, you'll love the Prison Fae series, a dark fantasy adventure based on myth and folklore. Get all the available books and stay tuned for the dramatic conclusion at urbanepics.com or find links below this video.